Okay, hello and welcome to our newest edition of Pay It Forward. My name is Ben Rookwood and I am part of the training staff at Cortex. As a mindset and functional fitness coach, I've had to connect with a lot of diverse people. For me to have the best chance of creating that relationship, I needed to have the understanding and consideration of others and their journey. Pay It Forward is a platform to raise awareness, create a better understanding, engage with people who may feel isolated, and challenge current stereotypes and outlooks. Today, we're going to tackle race, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by three friends and guests on today's show. I am joined by Jamie, Tammy, and Jordan. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
You right?
First take as well. Awesome. Okay, guys, so there's a lot of obviously news going on with everything that's going on in America. There's a lot of challenges towards racism and a big drive for being anti-racist. And there's obviously a lot of talk about the movement of Black Lives Matter. So what we're going to do then is, the whole purpose of today's session is just to give people a different outlook and a different perspective, a different point of view, to again make sure that we are not divided, okay, and we're unified in tackling and combating racism. So, guys, when we saw the news the other day with the the horrific scenes of George Floyd, what were your initial thoughts? How was you actually affected by this incident? Jamie.
Well, to be honest, Ben, I was a little bit kind of detached from it all. I did see the, was it 9 days ago, starting to do the rounds on the social media. And my first thought was, another day, another slay in America. As it's progressed, though, what I have wondered is why this case? When we've spoken before about the different involvement I've had over the years, but there was Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin, in America, and like dozens of cases where this kind of thing happens. But yet this time it's kind of blown up, and the only thing I can really say is that people have got more time on their hands at the minute, being on lockdown, and because of what's going on with the COVID-19, more people are paying attention to what's going on. So I guess that's kind of how I first thought about it over the last few days. Yeah,
that's an interesting point when you said about this is happening and everyone is shocked and disgusted, and rightly so. But this is not an isolated case, and it's been going through every year, every day. This thing's happening. And I was listening to a Killer Mike track the other day, and it was talking about the same sort of things. And he's came out again and obviously talked about the police and stuff like that. And it's crazy that it happens again, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of progression or learning from that. Can you why do you think that's happening?
I thought the same thing, because there was, They Don't Care About Us by Michael Jackson. What's going on? These songs, people have been talking about this thing, maybe less so from a celebrity point of view. I would say that mainstream music doesn't seem to address societal problems the same way as it used to do 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Like when we had Public Enemy, we had Rage Against the Machine, bands that, sole purpose almost was to highlight social injustice. And yet since 2002, 2003, we've been progressively getting worse, I would say, with the way we treat each other around the world, and different problems, financial crashes, what's been going on in America, still cases of people being killed in police custody here in the UK. And nothing's really been said or done en masse until the last week or so. So
yeah, you're right. I think obviously now a lot of people have a lot more distractions, so the things that take them away. And then you kind of obviously alluded to that, and now obviously with the high profileness, is it because that we haven't got as much distractions with obviously the current lockdown? Does that bring more attention? Does that kind of raised awareness. And again, subconsciously, that just shows you that there is obviously stuff going on around the world. If you sort of dig deeper, with the famine in Yemen and, droughts in Africa and stuff like that, there is other stuff going on in the world, but the media obviously has control of the narrative, really.
Yeah, I think that's an important point about social media is when it first came about. I don't know if you recall the Egyptian Spring.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was pushed, or the media said how Twitter was the catalyst for the Egyptian Spring, and at the same time the Occupy movement happened, and we had scenes where, replicated scenes in Egypt and New York. But one was, people getting their democracy, and the other one was like anarchists just trying to bring down capitalism.
Yeah.
And they wanted to try and control the flow of social media, but they weren't able to impose the legislation and stuff that they wanted on it. People kicked back about open source and freedom of speech and all the rest of it. So what they did, they've changed the algorithm now, so you get more of what you like and what you share. So you end up living in an echo chamber. Whereas before, it used to be real time. Twitter was chronological. The most recent tweet, all the social media pages were the same back in the day. 10 years ago, they were all chronological. So as it was happening, it was being posted. So when the Occupy movement happened and the financial crash, a lot more information was getting out to people, and there was more people starting to become awakened to what was going on. As they kind of change algorithms and stuff, I'd say that's kind of dropped off a little bit. But like you say, because of the lack of sport and lack of other outside distractions, and the fast pace of life that everyone was living before, everyone's kind of slowed down. They've got more time to sit and talk to each other. People are spending more time together in families, going for walks, and these conversations are being banded backwards and forwards. And you can't, because there's nothing else but COVID going on in the news. Now you've got this massive thing's blown up on the ITV and the BBC and whatever. People are getting it; they're almost seeing it firsthand.
Yeah,
I think that's why it's maybe exploded at a good time.
So like yesterday on social media, which was cool to see. As I was scrolling down, everyone obviously had a blacked out profile, or posted a blacked out picture for Blackout Tuesday. So we talked about the importance of stuff like that, but we've also talked about people just jumping on bandwagons. Like the Be Kind one was the biggest thing with Caroline Flack, and then within a month later, people were back to attacking each other. And I think that's where we're not learning the lessons here. And Jordan, you talked about that before, about people just jumping on bandwagons, again through lack of understanding of the importance of stuff, or education, or actually just speaking about stuff. Obviously doing a Blackout Tuesday post isn't enough. Where do you see, obviously, people, where should they go forward to start making a positive difference?
It's difficult, because even like for me, I've seen it's almost like that gift and a curse kind of thing. And I was even going to mention myself as well, that as good as it is, that it's sort of like it's gotten bigger than what I thought from when I first saw the video. Like what's happened since then, it's been like I've been kind of shocked as to how big it's gone. But for me at the same time, it's only because of the situation that we're in terms of Corona that I feel that it's become such a big thing, because people, they don't have anything else to do. So it's sort of like this has come up, but this has come up time and time again. And so at each interval, the problem is that then whether people have seen it or not, they haven't then gone away and educated themselves as to why things are the way that they are. And this is, humans are funny, because it's almost like it doesn't matter how good something is, someone will always find a way to flip it. And so it doesn't matter what message is being portrayed if that's people's first thought. And I just feel as though people need to think, like, why is something the way that it is? Like I've seen loads of people on social media, like even from like a rioting perspective, and saying like, oh, well, why are you rioting? Why can't it just be peaceful? That's the first thing. And then instead of actually thinking, oh well, why does it turn into that?
Mm.
And for me, like when you go away and you educate yourself as to like why it ends up like that, like inherently human beings are pretty violent anyway. You think in everything that we've done throughout history. So it's almost kind of like, what bugs me is then it almost gets attributed to black people in terms of like, oh, it's because they're violent, so that's how it's always going to end up. When you look back through history and things that have happened, like there's even posts about it anyway, but also it was the other day, it was like, 99 years ago on this day, like there's a thriving black community, and essentially white people just came along, rioted, looted, like everything from everyone. Like when you look at the sort of like the origins of everything, that's pretty much what happened anyway. And you just have this knock-on effect. And it's not like people say, obviously you will always get people that use it as an opportunity to fill their own void of wanting to be violent and then being able to almost get away with it. But for the majority, that's not the case. And then it just ends up being a knock-on effect of things that have happened. And so I just feel like people are not trying to understand why and where it comes from. And they're just trying to look for a way to flip the situation, instead of their first thought being, let me try and understand why, and try and educate myself about the situation. They just see it for what it is and then just try and flip it straight away, which is probably the most frustrating thing for me.
Yeah, and again, I think the media has a hand in that, because again, the actual attention from the racism that's going on has actually now been kind of sidetracked, because everything's just reported about things on fire, shops getting looted. And then that kind of I wouldn't say dilutes the empathy, but then that just distracts the attention from what's going on. And again, the coupling effect of why things happen is being ignored. Sorry, Jamie.
No, like you're absolutely right with the nail on the head there. With they dilute the empathy by, like Tammy's a photographer, and they say the camera doesn't lie, but the person who frames the picture is the one that tells the story.
Yeah.
When the student riots happened in 2010, I was there. I came back from the protest in Parliament Square and saw the news telling the world that students attacked police with Harris fencing, but that wasn't the case. People were stood around just chanting and gathering quite peacefully. Police charged everyone on horseback, and then they grabbed the Harris fencing to protect themselves. But the media framed it that people were throwing fences at horses. Like, well, no, people were using fences to try and stop the police from stampeding them on horseback.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people got to realise and understand. The media and the news and stuff like that, they deal in death, destruction, chaos. That's sexy to them. That's what sells.
The sensation.
Sensationalising things.
About that.
Yeah.
That's what sells. You've got to get people to click on the links. You've got to get people to stay on the links for more than 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is by giving them this false, or rather twisted, headline that they have to read all the way to the bottom to realize, oh, that's not what this headline was about. Well, okay. But not a lot of people are going to do that. So people take away the wrong thing from half an article when the rest of the article explains what it really is.
Yeah. And how much journalism is actually impartial. There's, sometimes obviously the journalist is going to have their own agenda, or the newspaper has their own agenda. I've seen it before, like just subtle things like when Raheem Sterling bought his mum a house, and it was just all about how it was vulgar and extravagant because how much money he'd spent and how much money this kid earns. And then, when Ben Foden done it, good old lad, looking after his mum and dad, now he earns all this money. It's just, it gets spun about. And I remember, again, an article about Caressa Dick, who's the head of the Met. And there was a picture of her, and she was talking about crime statistics and figures. And then there was just a picture of 2 black guys about to break into a house. And it's just like, out of all the pictures that talk about crime statistics, why have you picked that? Again, it's just subconsciously feeds people's minds, and that's their association. crime. Oh yeah, black people, police, white, and that's again, it's there every day. If you actually look and sift through it, you can see it. Obviously, it took me a while to see that, but for yourself, when did you kind of feel that there was an undertone of racism, or that there is this kind of weird use of language or interpretation of stuff?
It's one thing you learn growing up. There isn't a time where you come to realize.
Okay.
It's something that from when I was a kid, I knew, or my parents had been telling me how to act. I hadn't been seeing myself represented in a positive way in the media. I'm quite fortunate with my parents in the sense that they've always been very vocal, active people. So they never tried to shelter us. They let us know what the real was. And when I first moved to the UK, it was quite clear in my halls of residence, because you saw the split. You saw that the black kids had to stick together, because my first week being there, the name calling and the subtle jabs started coming. And, you know, this was something that I had heard about. I'd never really experienced, because Nigeria is a predominantly black country where everybody, you know, we don't have that issue. And then coming here, having been told about it and taught about it, that this is most likely going to happen. And then coming here and feeling those jabs for the first time, it's one of those things that shatters, first of all, your worldview. Even though you've heard about it, you've been taught about it, you understand it, you get a bit more deeper into how it makes you feel. And for me, I would say, apart from being taught about it, 2009 for me was a massive eye-opener in the terms of how that these two worlds live parallel to each other. So I don't know, that's what
Which is
that's
really,
when I learned.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people, you know, me included, think that obviously people my age, you know, 10 years older, 10 years and younger, you know, are quite open-minded, you know, have a diverse friendship group, and obviously they would say that they are, you know, not racist and stuff like that. But then, you know, you're just saying then that you're coming over to England to you know, to get an education, and you're mixing with, you know, the young educated generation that we have, and then, you know, you're experiencing that. Like, someone told me, you know, that is what they was expecting, experienced in the 70s or 80s. You go, okay, again, it's not right. It's, you know, but we kind of learn from it. We got away from that. But to know that still happens is, you know, is quite upsetting.
What's really funny about that is that that is a prime example coming from someone's mouth that lets you know that there is a problem here, because so many people, they look at America, and obviously we can't doubt that it's a lot worse there than what it is here. Like, that's you but that's not to say that it's stuff like that doesn't happen here. It might not happen on the same scale, but you have someone that comes over here and they experience it. So you can't then say, oh no, you're lying. Do you know what I mean? It's,
100%.
And I just feel like people, because they look at an extreme, or what seems like the worst situation at the moment, and then they compare it to the situation that they're in, and it's almost like, oh well, it's not that bad, so we don't need to protest here, or we don't need to really talk about it that much here, because it's not such a big deal. And it's like, it's actually almost kind of not irrelevant what scale that it's on, but it's the fact of that some people they just brush it off because it's not as bad as somewhere else. and they don't see it. And it's funny that Tammy says that he comes here and he sees the divide. And Jamie said something about it a little while ago as well, and instantly because I've not really spoken about it with any other like mixed race kids or like friends my age or whatever, but it's only now that I look back and I realize that growing up I was not confused, but like I didn't know where I fit in, because obviously I'm half white and half black. It was like, and you see, like, even though people I don't think they do it intentionally, especially as a kid as well, but you have like white people that will get together and black people that get together, Asian people that will get together and whatnot. And I was always like, do I go with the white kids or do I go with the black kids? And it's funny because I was always a strong enough person growing up where I had a group of white friends and a group of black friends. And I actually recently, before all of this like blew up, I actually put something on my Snapchat like literally about 3 weeks ago, and I said that both of my white friends and my black friends need to be held accountable for the way that they made me feel when I was younger. Not in a really, really bad way. I don't want to over exaggerate it, but like my white friends would always say, "Oh, you're so black," and my black friends would always say, "Oh, you're so white," because of something that I did that was white or black.
Yeah.
So I can understand why for mixed race kids as well, not to take away from what's going on, but I've always felt as though I'm seen as black. Even though I'm mixed race, the only people that might call me white are black people. And Jamie said like he experienced it himself of like being disliked or hated by white people and black people because they both see you as not them.
Yeah.
Almost. And so it's funny that Tammy says he comes over in was it 2009 and says he sees the divide straight away, and then I think he sees the divide. Jamie's obviously also experienced it from sort of like both angles, so to speak, and it's just confirms to me that actually no, I am right in how I think and feel based on my experiences growing up. And so that's like another reason like with this is sort of like when you get to hear other people's opinions, and it sort of like reaffirms what you think but you're not 100% sure of. It's like you almost doubt yourself kind of, and so that's why another reason I think this is good, just for people to see, like, even though we're talking about how black people are treated, I think sort of like for mixed race people, like Jamie said, black people will say, "Oh, you're too light-skinned to understand what someone black goes through," and it's like, well, no, because white people see me as black, even though I'm not.
So I'm 37. You said you were the next generation along. So how old are you?
27.
Okay, so did you find yourself? Sorry, Ben, just jumping your toes.
No, take it over, man. It's cool, man. I'm here to learn as well, man. You go with it, Jamie. That's why I got you on board, mate.
One of the questions I used to get thrown at me a lot when I was at school was, are you white or are you black? Yeah, and people used to try and force me to pigeonhole myself into being white or black. I struggled growing up because my father joined the army and he went, and then over time my mum and dad separated, so I was just left with my white family because my dad's family was in the British forces and they travelled around. So I didn't have black family to help me cope with being half black in a world that wasn't accepting mixed race children, or half caste kids as we were called back then.
Yeah.
I was wondering, did you have that problem when you were at school?
I think it's probably slightly a little bit different to me because up until I was about 12, turning 13, it was only then that my mum and dad broke up. But like throughout my whole childhood, I would spend a lot of time on like my mum's side of the family and my dad's side of the family. So I was exposed a lot. I was exposed to both a lot growing up. So by the time I got to high school, I obviously inherently, I'd had learned stuff from both sides, which is why then I found that it only then really become a problem when I got into high school, and some of the stuff that I did was classed as white and some of the stuff I did was classed as black. And it's almost like I had to, if I was with black people, I had to act more black. And if I was with white people, I had to act more white. And I think for, I suppose maybe a lot of mixed race kids, they'll like, without blowing my own trumpet, I feel as though because I was like such a strong-minded person from a young age, I almost didn't let it faze me. I might have changed slightly depending on what groups of people that I was with, but I was always still myself and almost just got on with it. But I see that I have mixed race friends that only have black friends and other mixed race friends that only have white friends. And I just feel like maybe at some point they did have that moment where they almost had to decide, am I white or am I black? And so I have this real issue, like now being sort of like a grown man, I have an issue of people, even still now, I feel as though that's how they see me. They can't understand that you can be both almost. And it's sort of like I have people that would say, I remember when I went to university and people, they said, oh, you're really well spoken. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You're articulate.
Yeah. There was like, oh, like you don't really act black. Like you speak really well. And I was like,
define acting black. You know, it's just
And so it's even to this day, I feel like it doesn't matter where you go as a mixed race person, you always trying to decipher where you fit in almost.
Yeah.
It's only now that I will always now, whenever that issue comes up, I will always prompt people and say, I'm not white, I'm mixed race, or I'm not black, I'm not black, I'm mixed race. So, because I'm quite strong about it.
Yeah.
But to what Jamie said, I think I have experienced it, but I didn't allow it to like define where I should put myself. And I never then put myself anywhere. I always just remained in the middle because I feel that's exactly what I am. So that's what I try as hard as I can to be.
So there's two things I want to pick up on there. Thank you, Jordan and Jamie, for that. And yeah, obviously, again, you know, that's not something that's ever crossed my mind. You know, for a mixed race person to kind of had to go through that. You know, I can, you know, you hear about people when they're confused about their sexuality and what a struggle that is, and you know, you're just a kid growing up, and then earlier on, you're starting to, you know, you're trying to go to a group or feel that you're being forced to a group, and then possibly you're not being accepted by a group, and it's just, that's something that you know, no one should go through, let alone a kid growing up. And then also the comments that you said, Jordan, about, you know, people just saying stuff like, oh, you know, you talk well, or, you know, alluding to the fact that there'd be a reason why you wouldn't, or you don't act that black. It's like, well, what does that black mean? What does that actually mean? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, you're a freaking human being. And that's what I think some people don't understand. People, you know, everyone's human. It should be defined by color. And I think that's kind of, speaking for myself, that's where I struggle with, how I did struggle understanding the Black Lives Matter, because I felt coloring something then created a division subconsciously, and that's why, you know, I can understand why people say all lives matter, but I can see why now they're missing the point, because it is obviously the black that people see that is creating the issue. So that needs to be tackled. And, you know, again, straight away, Tammy, you know, you come into this country, and in this day and age, you're still experiencing racism off, you know, young adults that should, you know, we should be learning from all the mistakes and the stuff that it shouldn't have happened in any sense. It's still happening today. Again, and I was quite naive to it. And I remember speaking to you, Jamie, I remember when I watched the documentary about Stephen Lawrence, and it was the anniversary of it. obviously I remember the case growing up as a child, and I remember it being on the news. And again, I was just naive to think that someone would just be killed just because they're black. And again, I was naive to think about how institutionalized racism was in some organizations like the police force and stuff like that. And it's just, but again, retracing back through that, the way that the social media narrative was, they were looking for dirt on Stephen Lawrence himself, and then his father, and then his mum, for everything that she does as well. She can come under fire. Yes, she's made some inflammatory comments before, but again, they're always looking for that attack to try and maybe not to justify what happened, but to detract from the attention that they lost a son through racism, and the fallout from that, and how bad it was to actually getting these guys sent down for it.
But that is what the media does. They like the same happened with Mark Duggan. They put articles saying he was the biggest gangster in Europe. Hang on, he had a mobile phone in his hand and you shot him like several times in the middle of the street.
Yeah, so I'll admit that. I remember when that first came out. I was kind of like, I bought into that. I was like, obviously, like you said, big time gangster from Tottenham. He was off to kill someone. Again, did he have a gun or anything on him? And again, so let's talk about that. So obviously, from a white person point of view, it wasn't a case about color. I was just a believer that, well, if you kind of live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. But then obviously that did get brought out into a kind of a race agenda or political agenda about that. And obviously, again, that obviously riots kicked off about that. That kind of obviously detracted the attention from that. So in regards to when that happened, how did that make you feel, Jamie, when the Mark Duggan incident happened?
Look, what gets me is there was precedent as well for like what happened with Charles de Mendes. He was mistaken. He shot on the underground. They unloaded on him. Wrong person. So somebody was having a piss, and then they looked round and they followed him out, shot him. So it made me angry more about the character assassination. Before the investigation's been done into what happened, who's responsible, was he armed or whatever, the press went straight into deflection mode of, well, he's a gangster and he deserves it.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing happens all the time. Like you said with Stephen Lawrence. I don't know if you're familiar with the case of Christopher Alder, a former paratrooper who was killed in South Yorkshire. He was dragged through to police custody cells with his trousers around his ankles, struck with the death gargle, and the officers were stood around and making monkey noises, and they got away with it. So between him being arrested for being ejected from a club to being brought into police custody, he was, the slogan is always the same: fell ill and died later in hospital. Well, yeah, perfectly fine before you arrested him. What happened? And they just go into character assassination. And everyone's talking about the media being shot at in America at the minute. Well, they're experiencing what it's like to be a protester on the other side. Mm. So all the times that they've mobilized to like protect the establishment, well, they're getting to see what it's like from the protester side of things
now. So in regards to obviously things like rioting and stuff like that, do you think that's due to the fact that, well, okay, we've tried being peaceful, we're trying to get our voices heard, and now this is the only way we get attention, whether that's right or wrong? Do you feel that's just a way of obviously fighting back, so to speak?
There's always going to be people that want to cause trouble. The thing is that violence doesn't get you anywhere. Yeah, there's no path to peace through violence. And even like you take the American civil rights movement, there was two like opposing spectrums of that argument: Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. One was all about peace, and the other one was about by any means necessary. Yeah. Even Malcolm X, towards the end, moved more towards peace is a better path to solving the problem. But what's been happening with what's going on in America is like it apes a lot of what happened with the Mark Duggan case. It starts off peaceful, and then something happens. Now, is it there's people being sent in to cause trouble, or people are coming down to capitalize on the environment to make trouble. Who knows? But all it does is water down the message for the people who are sat in their armchairs at home looking at it on the news. And like obviously before, we've mentioned about the current lockdown situation, but before the last 3 months, you've got to remember people get their news at prescribed times a day. They get it in the morning on the way to work. They might get it at lunchtime. They get it at dinner time, and just before they go to bed. It's like 1984. They get their prescribed 2 minutes 8. So if you're out there on the streets, like breaking into some poor person's shop and stealing shoes and cakes out of it, well, you're distracting from the message.
Yeah, but that's the last thing you take to bed.
Yeah, people that aren't actively engaged, the people who don't experience it, all they're going to see is people looting and destroying people's livelihoods, and they're going to have no sympathy for your cause.
Yeah.
But it's not to say that the people that are there on the protest genuinely are the ones causing the problem, but the people that are doing it, they're either reacting to something that's gone on through maybe aggressive policing, as we've seen with what's gone on in America, or just people that have gone in to just purposely cause trouble. But I don't think it helps the message personally.
Yeah, because I remember when I was in the fire service when the riots were happening, and I remember a pub in Dunstable got burnt down. People were just spread around the country, and people would just get on. They just wanted to cause trouble. Now that was burnt down by a white person. It had nothing to do with the message or Mark Duggan itself. It just, people just thought, oh yeah, it's summer, we're bored. There was no football tournament at the time. Let's burn something down, and they just got involved. But again, that got kind of pigeonholed and just said like, oh yeah, that was part of the knock-on effects of the riots and cause, and look what happened. But it had nothing really to do with it. It was just an idiot that thought, he could just go around and burn a pub down.
There is this side of the argument about people have protested peacefully, and it's got them nowhere. So, like the American footballer, he took a knee.
Yeah.
Kicked out, lost his job. Was it Joe Biden walked out of a stadium because he was kneeling during the anthem or something like that? Or some American politician walked out. And the same people also saying that you need to protest peacefully, not violently. But
nobody knows how to protest.
Yeah.
And that's the real reason why there is a protest. There's no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. People in Selma were peaceful, and it got violent because the police wanted it to get violent. At the moment, there are images circulating of police leaving bricks on the side of the road as bait for protesters. So someone starts something, and then there are bricks there. There's weapons, and they can immediately deploy riot police. I saw a video this morning. It was a helicopter shot, and the police was advancing. They were getting past this car, and they smashed it. The police smashed the car, and immediately the camera picked it. The camera panned out because they don't want to show that. They don't want to show the authorities causing the problem. These people, the big issue here is police reform. It's not just the fact that that the police is targeting black men, the fact that the police is killing black men. The fact is there is corruption. There is a big culture of corruption, and that culture of corruption is what enables acts like this and racists like this to carry on acting the way they do. And if there's no accountability, if we can't see these things, and that's the good thing about this pandemic, because it's allowed us to see these things. It's allowed us to tune out of our daily routines and the sitting on the tube and sweating and all of that nonsense. And you come back and you're too tired to even pick up the free Metro newspaper that doesn't have any information for you, So that's one thing. People can now see these things. There's a lot of anger in the community at the moment. There's a lot of fear in the community at the moment. because as much as people want to take to the streets to let their feelings or their points of views to be heard and known, there's a fear that a peaceful protest will become something other than that. Because like you said, there are these agitators who are in there, who are doing their own thing. And, you know, we catch them on video sometimes, but most of them we don't catch. And they cause injury to all these people, to people who just want to be peaceful and speak their mind. And it's all really tiring. It's annoying. We're thankful for the support that we've received from the whole, you know, community, the people that come out, the non-people of color who do come out and help. And it's just one of those things where you're trying to figure out who really is for you, because people might be in that protest who aren't really for you. They're there against you. And it happens. It just happens.
But who polices the police? The IPC is not fit for purpose, because over 3,000 like custody deaths in the UK of you know, black or minority people, and not one police officer has ever been tried or charged. You know, and my nephews are 13 and 14, and you know, they're darker skinned than I am, and they were talking to me about this recently, about what's been going on in America, and taking a real keen interest in it, asking me about my experiences. And I thought when I was their age that by the time I was a man and, you know, maybe old enough to have my own children, the society might have moved on a bit. Yeah. But you know, I am sitting there telling them, you know, it doesn't pay to, you know, mess about with police because your skin's the wrong colour. You know, really sad.
So that's an interesting point, Jamie, there, and that's kind of like when I started. I thought, I don't know, maybe, I don't know why, whether my naivety or obviously, you know, again, just unaware, but when I was growing up, I don't feel that there was this level of racism or division or segregation at all. It just seems to be that there seems to be a lot more kind of divide, and
you don't see it until you see it.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm just late to seeing it, Tammy. I was very late to seeing it until I kind of obviously grew up and left home and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm not denying that it was there. Like I said,
you know of it, and that's what we're trying to. Well, everyone is getting to understand now. You know of it. There is no white person on this planet that you ask about how Black people are treated that does not know of it.
Yeah.
And you think, you know, it's gonna get better. It's not that different, or it's only in certain cities, or only the deep South where people are openly racist. Everybody knows, but no one really wants to see it. No one wants to engage. They haven't wanted to engage and constantly, you know, be active and understand. They know, but they don't understand, you know. And right now, I think that's one of the reasons why I'm quite positive in my outlook towards the way this movement is going, is because there are more people trying to educate themselves and trying to understand, and there are more people pushing that message out for people to take the time from their not so busy routines or days at the moment to learn and understand what Black people have been facing for centuries, what they continue to face, and that the old slave mill is still running. It's slow, but it's still grinding. It's still there.
It's even for me, like this is like, as well, now I knew where this would end up going, and I was saying to you guys earlier that the most important thing for me is that people, they go away and actually educate themselves, as opposed to seeing something and just trying to flip it.
Yeah.
Actually understand, like, why is it happening? So you sort of like, people are protesting for a reason, and yes, it might end up in riots, and it's kind of like, well, Tammy was saying, like, there is no right way to protest. You protested against something that's happening that a group of people have a situation that a group of people have created, and we talk about the police and there being no accountability. It's like if you are a police officer for however many years, has been predominantly white, and so they've been enforcing the law, and then you keep going through this cycle. They're not being held accountable. You almost just come to a position where it's like, well, I can kind of do what I want, and even if I do get caught for it, I'm only just going to get a slap on the wrist. I'm not actually, so I don't need to see the person. And to be fair, it could actually be anyone. It's just obviously there's deeper rooted issues that means that it happens to Black people far more. But it's just this sense of empowerment and like entitled to being able to do whatever it is that you want that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's like you get to a point you get to a roadblock and a protest might happen. It doesn't matter whether you do it peacefully or violently. Generally, the leaders end up dead. So it's kind of like you can't now sit here in this day and age and see something and see it for what it is. You have to go away and you have to understand and you have to educate how it got to this point. Like it doesn't just happen. There's this knock-on effect. It starts somewhere, and you think like social media, as bad as it is also a great thing as well, because there is so much that people can see now. It's very easy to get out like educational pieces that people can just quickly swipe through and just a quick snippet and like, oh, now it makes sense. So it's very easy for people to educate themselves, which is why I get frustrated when I see people, their first thought is to say, but, or what if, or instead of pausing for a second and thinking, why is that the way that it is? I've seen people today, a girl I know personally and who's mixed race, who's from Luton as well, said something along the lines of, don't shout Black Lives Matter where if you're going out killing and stabbing and robbing and this and other Black people over postcodes, which to a degree I agree with, but to me it was kind of like she saw potentially maybe a Black person or probably young Black kids, because obviously we talk about lots of like gang culture and stuff like that, and she's probably thinking, oh well, you're being a hypocrite because you've gone out and done bad to other Black people. And I thought, again, you're just taking it and trying to flip it to detract from the message, when like sort of like kids in gangs, that's a completely separate issue, and they're not killing or stabbing each other because they're Black. It's a completely different issue. So it's like going into the shop and stealing something because you have no money but you're hungry, and then turning around and saying, oh, you shouldn't steal. And then someone else saying, oh, well, you're not allowed to say that you can't steal because you've stolen before. But there was a reason why you did that. And people don't look and educate themselves at the reasons behind why something happens. They just see it for what it is and just think, oh, that doesn't look like the way I want it to look. So I'm going to change the story to make it that way.
There's an awesome book by someone called Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers. And it just talks about the way that people act. And he talks about that there's always a coupling effect to something happening. Like obviously you touched on there, talk about a gang culture. And it's obviously a perception that is a Black problem, so to speak. But there's a reason why there is kids killing each other. And it's a reason why this is happening, but you're not identifying the coupling effect of why that's happening. You're just looking at that and just seeing colour as the motive. It's a Black person problem. It's not. It's a social problem. It's a human problem, and again, it shouldn't be ignored just because of colour of skin.
Is when you look at the modern day sort of like origin, sort of like forgetting everything that's happened in the past, you for a moment you see that these things happen, and obviously it's not just like Black on Black. It could be anyone on anyone, and it always ends up being, for the most part, in areas of poverty. And all you notice is that these areas of poverty, not to say that there aren't white people that are in poverty, but when you look at the true percentages of what's happening, that obviously we see it all the time, and people have been saying it's disproportionate within ethnic minorities, and it's just as simple as that, and that stems from racism. So when you look at stuff that's happening now, and then you educate as to why it's happening, you go along the chain, and then eventually you always end up coming back to the same thing. And it's like you have this history of slavery, and then when it's abolished, like, it's not, oh, we're sorry, here, have this to try and now better yourselves. It's like that wasn't even, like, black people weren't even given the opportunity to do that, because they weren't given anything. I see something in the other day. It was about taxpayers were still paying the money towards slave owners when they abolished it. Up until it was like 2015, the taxpayers of today are still paying off what was like slave owners being refunded for having their slaves taken away from them, basically.
So like loss of earnings, like a compensation.
It's reparations.
Like that. So you have this situation. It's like, okay, cool. We don't agree with this anymore, so we're going to stop it from happening. But we're not going to give back to black people. We're just gonna refund the white people for.
There are a lot of groups that are campaigning and actively trying to get the governments to pass reparation bills in favor of black people who are from these slave families, because there's no reason why you would give the white slave owner money back and then let the black man just go like that, and just, nothing for his trouble, nothing for the torture, nothing for the rape and murder of his family. And that's just that.
Another thing that bugs me as well is that what you also have to remember is when you talk about things that are happening now, and they say, oh, black on black crime. What you have to remember is, and I've had a lot of people, they say, oh, but whatever culture that it may be, they all stick together and they get together, and all of their families earn money together, and this, that, and the other. And I always, and this is what I mean, because people they've not educated themselves. I have the amount of times I've had to tell people, here's what you need to understand about black culture and why I feel things are the way that they are, because you go back to racism, and they never wanted that to happen. They never wanted black people to get together and protest together to try and change things. So they've have this black and light-skinned issue that white people created. And so obviously it's always funny, because I always Kanye West references it in one of his songs, and he says like a light-skinned slave, we in the house, basically. There's other bad words in there, but and it's like, and so many, I find it crazy how so many people that don't know that like white people actively went out of their way to segregate dark-skinned black people and light-skinned black people. So the lighter-skinned black people were allowed in the house, so they become house slaves. So they have
this is a big thing in the Caribbean.
Yes, and so when you say, okay, we don't want slavery no more, so all of you black people go there, you have this period of time where black people actually do hate each other, because you are a more privileged black person than someone who's out in the blistering heat picking whatever. And so there's already this segregation between black people, and then you throw them all out with each other. What do you expect them to do? Of course they're going to fight amongst each other, and it's, oh, why was you allowed in the house? Because you was a lighter shade of black than me. And so then you fast forward hundreds of years, and when that was manifested, what you get to now, of course, like it may happen in a slightly different way, but it still even happens today, where even for me, like, I'm like light skinned because I'm mixed race, but you still, especially from America as well, you still have this, oh, like light-skinned black guys are pretty boys, and they can't be a bad boy, or whatever it is. And you see it in like rap and stuff like that. And it's sort of like you just have this long chain of events that, again, when you go to the origins of it and you go out of your way to try and learn and understand why something is the way that it is, again, it comes back to what white slave owners created through racism.
Kind of meaningful, isn't it? Because like in America, that's the one drop rule. The one drop rule, isn't it? So if you've got like 1/16 of your blood is black, then you're black. And as a child growing up, that was one thing that really used to grate me, when the media used to call people black when they're clearly half white, half black. So but my mum actually was someone who didn't really understand my gripe with that. You know, my mum being white and my dad black, she couldn't understand why I'd complain about Lewis Hamilton being called the first black Formula One driver.
Yeah.
I was like, well, he's not black. His mum, his mum is white. And I had to try and like frame it in a way that she understood. And, growing up, I wanted to be a rugby player, and I wanted to play for England. And I said to her, imagine if I'd have made it and captain England, and they'd have turned around and said, England's first black rugby captain. How would that have made you felt sat at home or sat on the sidelines at Twickenham as I've been announced as the first black captain? And it sunk in then, she got it. But that has happened with pretty much everyone in the media until Meghan Markle married Prince Harry.
Yeah, she ain't black now, is she?
But before that, she would have just been another black person.
Yeah.
Media frames these things to create that divide as well.
But again, obviously touching on what you said about obviously the way that someone's reported, and again, it would be like, oh, black man or Muslim man. But if anything else, there isn't that kind of prerequisite of the religion or colour brought into it. And
well, terror's a great example, isn't it? A white person in America shoots up a school and they get handcuffed and dragged, given room to make sure they're hydrated. But that person, runs a stop sign and they get shot in the street or, strangled to death.
And this is what I mean when I was saying about the accountability. When you it's almost like, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a police officer, so I don't know. But I can just imagine that they just must feel like they know exactly what it is that they can and cannot get away with, based on what has happened over hundreds of years. So you get to a head, and you get to a point now where it's like, literally, for me, it's kind of like, in whatever way that you're protesting, if it ends up in rioting, if it's kind of, for me at the moment, it's just kind of like, it is what it is. Because as much as I don't agree with certain things that go on, it's sort of like, I'd rather people express themselves in some way than no way at all, because something has to change. But then the problem that I fear is that it almost now doesn't even matter whether it's done peacefully or violently. There isn't anyone in a position of power that's going to turn around and say, okay, stop, I'm going to put my foot down, here's what's going to happen. I don't like, because Trump's not going to turn around and say, okay, every black man or person that's murdered by a police officer, automatically they need to be arrested, and there needs to be an like a thorough investigation. Like, no, there's not anyone that's going to do that. I can't even see when Obama was in power, I can't even see him being, even if he wanted to do that, it would get shut down, because all the other people that are in power are not on the same. It's like they need to protect what's being created. And it's sort of like you get given a little bit more and a little bit more, sort of like every 10, 20, 30 years or whatever that it might be. But it's like there just isn't anyone, and there is not, even though the people are together and protesting, there isn't anyone in power that's going to put their foot down. And
that's part of what he was saying about, going into forgetting the big elections, not entirely forgetting the big elections, but going into the grassroots. That's what you need to do. You need to know who your local DA is, who your local, alderman is. You need to know who your mayor is. You need to actively vote and actively control who you put over you.
And I was literally about to say, Like, what's also more upsetting as well when we're talking about the educational side of things is that people, they don't understand this. They don't understand that when you genuinely get together and you're all educated, you can actually change something. So when you come to voting, like, so many people, they'll say, oh, it doesn't even matter who I vote for.
Oh man,
The
yeah.
same. And I've even said that myself. I've even said that myself, and it was only at college, and it was my English lit tutor who was South African, and he said exactly the same thing as well. And I was at a point in my life where I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to vote. And it was just a conversation that I had with him, and he made me realize, if everyone thinks the same thing, then of course it will never change. But if slowly but surely it might happen. So don't be that person to just completely disregard it, because if everyone does the same thing, it never changes. But if there's one person and then another person, at some point, hopefully, enough people can get together to actually change something. But then you need to know your stuff as well. You can't just blindly vote.
So with that then, to kind of wrap something up here, to move forward, what would you suggest, or what do you think? I'm not saying that you have to come up with a solution, but how would you feel, guys, to move forward? How can we come together and tackle this problem and spread the word about anti-racism? Jamie, do you want to start us off first, buddy?
I'm not so sure what the answer is really, Ben, because I think people are so divided at the minute in ways. And touching on what you said earlier on about is it worse now than it was, say, than when we were at school? In some ways, it probably is. With things like UKIP coming along and Nigel Farage's campaign to get us out of Europe, and how that's changed perceptions of people in country. People have become more emboldened. So whereas it might have been dying off and maybe becoming a little bit more less overt, I think definitely in the last 5-6 years there's been an upward trend in that kind of racist ideology, I guess, is kind of come back to the forefront. People are a product of their environment. And Jordan touched on, the socio-economic problem. People that live in poverty. That is a struggle, and it's not any one thing that's going to solve it. It's going to have to be like a multi-faceted, approach to, solving people's economic situations, improving people's access to information, education. And people are products of their environment. No one learns. No one's born racist, or hating someone because of their religion. They're things people learn, and if you don't change the environment in which people are getting their information, having the media do a better job at reporting things, you can't. It needs to be a whole system approach, I guess, to changing the way people see things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. Identify the coupling effects to what creates this problem and tackle them. Tammy.
It's like Jamie said, there isn't a quick fix. There isn't a one-stop solution. At the moment, there is, we should support the legislation, or we should support the petitions for police reforms. That's a very big part of it. We need to tackle that organization. It needs to be audited. It needs to go through a massive procedural change that needs to happen. And that is number one on the list. Secondly, that I would say we need to also look at the education system. There's a reason why people in poorer neighborhoods get worse education and people in slightly better neighborhoods get better education. And that is part of the problem, because you end up in a circle where less people get to university level. And that means that these people, these young boys, grow up and end up living in the same place and giving so much value to that postcode that postcode doesn't deserve. And they end up fighting each other over blocks and over stupid things that don't mean anything, that generally shouldn't even be a thing. So we need to talk about the education system. We need to talk about helping people in minority groups to be better educated, to better succeed, not just academically, but socially as well. I know there is a predatory lending policy in America at the moment that offers higher interest loans to Black people and lower interest loans to white people. They redline so people in certain postcodes or zip codes can't get funding, they can't get loans, they can't get credit cards. And even when they do, the interest rates are so high. These are things that need to be addressed. You cannot chain people in a cycle of poverty and expect them to be happy with it.
Yeah.
And then treat them poorly by targeting their young boys and expect them to be happy with it. So I'm challenging everyone, basically, sign the petitions, read about the bills that are about to be passed, read about legislation that's been passed, and find out who you need to talk to repeal the legislation that is harmful to us as a people. And also work with community initiatives to help mentor young ones as well. And try and break that cycle, break that chain that we're still dealing with. And most importantly, get involved in the political climate of your community, because there is nothing more important than having a voice. And we can't be protesting every 3 weeks. We can't be letting someone dies another week, and then we're out there again and again and again, because we need to gather for our voices to be heard. We need to start putting our people in places where they can speak for us. And we don't have to be out there shouting to people who do not want to hear us. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you. Jordan, to finish us off then, buddy.
Yeah, I also agree that obviously there's not any one thing that can be done. I think a number of things have to be addressed at the same time. But if I had to pick three, it would definitely have to be police reform, just for them to be held accountable, because then it makes them think twice on their actions. Because if they know that they're just going to get a slap on the wrist, then there's not really any reason or any deterrent for them, so they don't really need to think about what they're doing. That would be one. Two would be some sort of educational intervention of some kind for parents and kids. For me, I think that the only way that is things are going to change is the next generation. I don't think there's anything that can be done immediately for there to be the change that we want to see. But if you're going to educate the people that are having children so that they can reinforce stuff to them, and then they can have it pushed on them whilst they're in school so that they can learn more, even down to Black history. Like, I think even me being in school, I think the only thing I learned about Black history was slavery.
Yeah.
And I don't even really remember that much of what I was told. And like, I don't ever really remember feeling awkward at that time either. But if I was fully Black, I could imagine that was probably quite awkward to sit in a room. Like if somewhere like Luton, where there's all walks of life in the classroom anyway, probably doesn't matter as much. But if you're in a predominantly white area, and they teach that, and you're like one or two Black kids in a class, I imagine that feels pretty awkward. So yeah, some sort of educational intervention, and to actually do something in areas of poverty in general, not even just sort of like black communities, but
Yeah.
for kids that are in poverty. Like, I think from when I was at school, the amount of stuff that there was to do after school and youth clubs and stuff like that, and they're not around anymore. And that 100% doesn't help at all. So I think like that sort of like focusing, putting more money into the community is like super important. I think they're probably the three main things that you can sort of like change immediately to try and tackle the issue, so that as kids are growing up, then they're not sitting here 20, 30 years from now having this conversation, because they're all on the same page. And it's like they don't go out and think, oh, the police are going to do this, and they're not misinformed about the history of what's happened, and there's actually stuff for them to do whilst they're growing up. So yeah, they're like the three things for me personally.
I mean, one thing I might add to what we've said there is going back to Martin Luther King again. One of his, he's probably the most famous speech that people think of is the "I Have a Dream." But his last speech, when he talked about going to the mountaintop, in that speech he talked about withdrawing economically from companies that were treating staff or not paying them like the way they should be paid. So he called out some different bread companies and different drink companies. These people aren't going to give us the same standard of like conditions, then we just won't use their product. And maybe that's something that moving forward that we should start looking to do. There's an ice cream company's gone out there and gone full tilt with their comments about white supremacy, and it's like, that's very good. There's other companies that have come out and just offered hopes and prayers, and hopes and prayers haven't got us anywhere. So companies and organizations and industries don't want to start treating their staff better, getting behind the message, then we should start withdrawing economically from supporting them, and then force change that way as well.
Definitely. And Tammy, I think obviously you thought about, you can make a difference, and there is obviously a way. It doesn't have to be protesting. You can be very active, and it's everyone's duty to be a positive human and help everyone around you. And in this time of need, it's helping the black community, and it's everyone's responsibility to pitch in and help. Guys, that was an awesome discussion. Thank you very much. As always, I've learnt loads, and I appreciate that. Hopefully, to everyone that has watched, they've learned something too. Please give your comments and feedback if there's anything else that you wanted to discuss, or if you feel that you want to come on and voice your outlook or experiences and opinions, or if you feel that there's something else that needs to be tackled and talked about, then please get in touch and we'll happily arrange it. Guys, I'd love to invite you back on again at some time. Again, we can come back and reflect, and again, I think there's so much more that we can talk about, and there's so much many more agendas that we can tackle. So hopefully, I'd love to welcome you all back on. Appreciate your time, your honesty, your openness. It's been brilliant to listen to, and I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.